connect with the world's most premium publishers by using innovative formats and proprietary data to deliver highly viewable, brand-safe campaigns at scale. But Erica and Courtney, it's more about you than it is about me today. And I see both of you have much newer computers than I do. You have no problems with your backgrounds. So we're starting off on the right foot here. Before we dive in, I figured we could just do a quick round of introductions. So if you could please quickly just introduce yourself and expand a bit on your role and your remit at PepsiCo. I think that'd be a great place to start. Courtney, do you want to go first?
Awesome. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to be here. I was listening to the panel before and I heard some chatter about Anthony Davis, which is one of our Ruffles athletes. So excited to be chatting. I lead all of Ruffles brand marketing here at PepsiCo. So everything from comms, equity, innovation, activation, and yeah, we are the official ship of the NBA. So very proud.
Hey everyone, I'm Erica Smith. I'm Senior Marketing Manager on the Pepsi sports team leading NBA and WNBA, mostly focused on Mountain Dew. So really excited to be with all of you today.
Excellent. All right, I think we're ready. It's time to jump in. And I think the best way to frame up this conversation today is to actually start by looking backwards. So, I thought maybe we could kick things off by just kind of speaking a little bit about PepsiCo's legacy approach to sports marketing in general. Historically, how has that sort of worked for you? What has the approach been? Is it brand by brand? Do you guys look at it as a sort of portfolio-wide opportunity? And Courtney, maybe you could start us off there with just giving us a little bit of background.
Yeah, absolutely. PepsiCo, as you guys know, has a rich history in sports marketing, and we take a portfolio and a brand approach. So from a portfolio perspective, you'll see some of our brands like Frito-Lay activate, around the Super Bowl. We had a really robust program with Twas the Night Before Super Bowl, a commercial and in-store events. And what you see here at Frito-Lay too with the NBA is a March Hoops program that we had in store. You saw it led by Ruffles, but a lot of our brands as well. So really put the consumer first, and we think through, what are our brand strategies? Should this be a league? Should this be an athlete? Should this be a portfolio? Should it be brand? And design those plans as such.
Excellent. And when historically you've been looking at getting involved with specific leagues or taking a look at your sports marketing approach in general, is there anything in particular that you look for? Are there things that you look for in specific athletes or in leagues specifically when thinking about which partnerships to explore? Could you expand on maybe what you guys look for?
Yeah, so for Ruffles, I can say, what we look for is we start with the consumer. So for Ruffles, we call our consumer the original. And this is Gen Z. They're focused on individuality. And really our values and passions of this consumer align perfectly with the NBA. And so when we really, excuse me, my allergies are acting up today. When we as a brand start unpacking, our brand plans, we really look at goals. And so instead of kind of putting sports marketing first, we put our brand plans in the audience and the consumer and figure out how it aligns with our strategies. So for Ruffles, for example, from an innovation perspective, you saw us launch Flamin' Hot Barbecue a few months ago with Jason. So this was, the innovation and partnering with him. It was kind of the sweet spot. He's from St. Louis. He likes, as a brand team, we had some innovations in the hopper and just really started finding that natural alignment between a partner, the brand plans, and what we're all trying to do. So it's really just kind of a combined approach for whatever we're working on as a brand team.
And Erica, is there sort of a difference on the do side of things, for example, or you guys sort of are there other things you're keying in on, elements that you're keying in on?
Absolutely. So we definitely look at our sports partnership with the NBA and WNBA at both a national and a local level. So our objective is to reach as many NBA fans as possible. And we're able to do that with the national tentpole events and our sponsorship of the Mountain Dew 3-point contest at All-Star, and also our presence at other tentpole events such as playoffs. But we also want to have a number of team relationships to make sure that we're engaging with fans on the local level. And so we have a number of partnerships with teams all across the United States and also athletes in local markets as well. For example, Jamal Murray in the West Division representing the Denver Nuggets. And so we really want to tap in at both a national and a local level. And then in terms of our do athlete roster for the NBA and WNBA, similar to what Courtney said, we definitely want to make sure that we're tapping into Gen Z consumers and those that align with the brand values. And so we have tapped into those with very large reaches, such as Zion Williamson and Jamal Murray, Asia Wilson. And then again, we have our local roster as well to make sure that we're resonating with fans all across different markets.
I love the focus on sort of individuality and creativity and letting your personality shine through. And certainly there's no lack of personalities in the NBA. It's a great league with a lot of, I would say, great folks to partner up with. So makes a lot of sense that you're so involved there. So we talked a little bit about legacy approach, but I have to ask the question how the approach has maybe changed amidst the pandemic. Obviously, lack of fans presented some challenges in terms of on-site activation, live eventing. Are there certain channels or tactics that you've seen as maybe more or less effective since sort of the onset of COVID last year? And maybe we could start, Erica, with you on this one.
Sure, absolutely. So our approach definitely has changed as a result of the pandemic. We know that NBA fans are not able to go to as many games and tentpole events. And so we really have focused our strategy on meeting consumers where they are at home. And so we've had a larger digital presence across a lot of our activations this year. For example, we actually worked with Blue Wire to launch a podcast called The Do Zone with Drewski. Given that we know Drewski is an up and coming comedian and that NBA fans also love comedy, and obviously the podcast space has boomed, we wanted to make sure that we had a presence there. And so if you all haven't checked that out, we have 10 different episodes and we are interviewing players from Zion Williamson, Asia Wilson, Nick Young, talking about their journeys to the league and also their passions off of the court, because we've realized that NBA fans not only want to see their performance in games, but want to know about their passions and their interests and entrepreneurial endeavors as well. And so we have that podcast that we launch in just around the time of playoffs when we know that there's a laser focus on the league. We also had much more content leading up to each of the tentpole events. So for All-Star, also for playoffs and WNBA All-Star this year, we actually worked with the NBPA on a partnership called Into the Do Zone. And so we had interviews across a number of athletes leading into those events. Again, talking about how excited they were to show up at All-Star and the playoffs this season. And actually that partnership was able to give us access to athletes that were not on our roster, like Rajon Rondo and Jordan Clarkson, who we all know had a great playoffs run. So we've had a lot of digital content from the podcast, Enter the Do Zone series. So those are just a few examples of execution so that we can meet consumers at home.
It's awesome. So cool, Erica. Courtney, how about Ruffles? Is there anything sort of unique, similar to the Do Zone that Ruffles explored when the live and in-person eventing sort of went away?
Yes, there is. And I would just start out by saying, gosh, like what hasn't changed because of the last, 18 months, if you will. Ruffles and Mountain Dew, the week after really COVID started getting worse was when we were really getting into the thick of All-Star Weekend. So that's one of our biggest tentpoles. And, we weren't able to activate live. And what I would say is, I've been just so humble and gracious for the league partnerships we have built to be able to pivot our plans and come up with new ways. And I think we're going to be better off in the long run for the agility and the flexibility and the creativity that we bring. And so for Ruffles, we're really excited, similar things like Erica talked about. A couple things we did, we were first to market with a Reddit AMA. And if you just look at, engaging fans as they're just in these real-time conversations, like those are the conversations of the brand that we want to be a part of. That was a great collaboration with Ruffles and the NBA to be able to do that with Jason Tatum. And, when you just look at e-commerce too, right? People weren't going to grocery stores as much. And so, really excited as well with the NBA's partnership with DoorDash, what that unlocked for us over the last year and, some of the plans that we have in the future with that as well. And, I think it just really caused us all to take a step back and say, hey, yeah, we're not there in person, but what can we do, to truly drive fan engagement, continue to promote sports? Just one example of something we did as well is we launched our first campaign on Ruffles in a decade, and we launched that at the Grammys and at All-Star this past February and March, if you will. And one of the things we did is we put a sneaker, a new Ruffles ridge top sneaker, what we call the armored ridge top, on Anthony Davis, and then dropped that through some partners around the NBA playoffs. And so that was just a fun way. We as a brand team kind of took a step back and said, okay, we're creating a new TV commercial. Anthony Davis is going to be, you know, one of our major talents. Like, what's something fun that we could do and thread it through to our next NBA tentpole at playoffs, knowing that fans were a little disappointed they couldn't be live for All-Star Week. So again, I think it's all really just about looking at the glass half full, trying to bring creativity and meet fans wherever they are on their journey and the current circumstances.
That's great. And you mentioned the partnership with Reddit, which is obviously makes a ton of sense given the audience. And out of my own curiosity, would love to understand a little bit more about, you know, how you leverage social listening. Is that something that you're able to feel like you can effectively manage for? Are there tools that you utilize to be able to sort of really keep a strong finger on the pulse of what this very rabid fan base is thinking and feeling? Anything that you could share on sort of techniques or approaches to how you employ social listening?
Yeah, absolutely. I can start, and Erica, build. You know, and this is such a core part of our job. You know, we say we are not the consumer 100%, but we try to be our consumer and our audience, and really just have a pulse on that culture at all times. And the NBA is one of the most engaged and active fan bases, which is what makes our jobs so fun. So we have a lot of internal tools to do real-time social listening, and then also working with our agencies, but then as individuals, just constantly monitoring what's going on. And it allows us to do a lot of real-time cultural and social stunts. You know, one of the things we just launched a couple of fun little packaging takeovers with the Bucks win, called the championship, and being an official sponsor of Team USA basketball as well. But candidly, this is something that we want to get better at. You know, we are, I would say, not as fast as we should be. We want to be in those conversations, real time, engaging with fans. And, you know, just something that we're continually monitoring, you know, with our leagues and our athletes, and what are the best ways to surprise and delight, and just allow, you know, like Erica said earlier, one of the things we can do is show fans a different side to the NBA athletes with brand partnerships. And that's something that we're continuing to look to do through social media.
Yes, absolutely. Just to build on that, we definitely have a plethora of social media tools. We use Zoom, Tagger, we're even investing in Fan AI, but also as a very avid NBA fan myself, I am definitely in the weeds each and every day. NBA Twitter, WNBA Twitter, and Instagram, Bleacher Report, Complex, watching ESPN. So it definitely helps to be a fan in these types of roles. And so always keeping a pulse on it. And we also have a dedicated social media team on Mountain Dew, and they're doing a lot of listening real time all day, every day on particularly our Dew athlete roster, but also across the league. So we don't miss a beat.
Well, one thing that I think is just really interesting hearing you both talk about, you know, how maybe strategies have changed and how you handled a really fanless, you know, no real audience to be able to entertain in person amidst the pandemic. It seems like it set the table for obviously more of a digital focus in terms of your activation strategy, but also it seems like it attracted some, or afforded you some opportunity to explore some new innovations, to have set up some new partnerships that maybe otherwise wouldn't have existed. So that's kind of a nice takeaway. I'm curious, you know, are there other technologies, emerging capabilities, co-ops that you're particularly excited about within sports marketing? You know, the DoorDash one, Courtney, that you mentioned, I think is really interesting. If you want to go more into that, anything else that you guys are working on that you think is really kind of pushing the envelope in some sort of innovative new technique and strategy?
Yeah, you know, a few things we're monitoring, you know, as a Ruffles brand team with all of our partners. You know, the crypto space, just really exciting. Where's that going to go? We love these nascent industries, and trying to figure out what's the right role for brands to play with their athletes and with the leagues. Lots of conversation going on about that right now. Yeah, I would say second. I mean, gosh, the NIL industry and with the NCAA athlete changes, that's something we're continuing to look at as a brand. And how do we want to think about that in terms of our audiences and where we want to go as the official chip of the NBA, but also like we like to say, the official chip of basketball. And just from a media partner perspective too, the way that consumers are consuming content and the kind of always on nature of social media and streaming and the bifurcation of everything, that landscape is just changing so quickly. So continuing to just make sure that we're on kind of the forefront of those partnerships, and again, partnering with the NBA on that as well as they continue to drive engagement across the board.
Yeah, and just to build on that, we also are more responsible than ever at PepsiCo to make sure that we are proving out the ROI of these partnerships with the leagues. And so data is more important than ever. We're working with the league on partner health surveys. We're also working with MarketCast on quarterly reports just to see how we're tracking in terms of NBA fans' awareness of Mountain Dew being the official soft drink of the NBA. We're working on awareness, familiarity, consideration, purchase intent. So, to the top of our organization, we're definitely looking at data in a deeper way across all these different metrics and partnerships to ensure that we are moving the needle.
And we talked a little bit about this. We talked about it in our pre-call, but we've talked about it on this call as well, which is just, of course, the NBA, one of the great assets of the NBA is this just super dedicated, rabid fan base, which we've touched on. But I also think that the league itself deserves some credit. I mean, you look at some of the other sports leagues out there, and the NBA has really been praised for their innovative approach to really embracing digital as a means of bringing in and connecting with the newer and younger fan base. And so I'd really interested to hear from your perspective how their media strategy has maybe enabled you as a brand, as PepsiCo, to connect in a deeper way with your audiences. Erica, maybe we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, happy to jump in here. The league has helped us a ton this season. So as you know, the NBA social following is huge across Facebook, over 42 million, Twitter, over 30 million followers. And obviously that's where NBA fans are going to see NBA content, right? More so than Mountain Dew owned channels. And so we definitely have tapped into NBA media across Enter the Dew Zone executions to ensure that NBA fans are seeing that content and making that association with Mountain Dew being the official sponsor of the NBA. So we've leveraged it for that content. We've also been able to leverage NBA Twitter and Instagram to promote the Dew Zone with Drewski, so that NBA fans are aware that Mountain Dew has a podcast out there tailored to their interests. We also leveraged the WNBA social platforms for All-Star. So we really leaned in for All-Star this year. We collaborated with Asia Wilson to create merchandise to celebrate her MVP title for last season. And we had a sweepstakes where fans could actually win the sweatshirts and the do-rags that we created. So we were able to get support from WNBA channels for that particular promotion, and also our interview with Asia, and then upcoming one with another WNBA player. So we definitely love the fact that NBA and WNBA fans are so engaged on social. And so we tap into them for every single execution now to make sure that our content lives on their channels.
That's great. Any builds on that, Courtney?
Yeah, the only build that I would say, the content and the replays, just the longevity of it. So, it's pre-game, it's the game, it's the post. I think we've been able to partner with the NBA on doing some of those live replays, making sure that our brand design language is coming through. Ruffles has a 4-point ridge line, and so we really leaned into that in a fun way to really show highlights of athletes, shooting beyond the three. And so I think, again, it's just really partnering together to figure out what's the content and what's the value. How do we promote both our brands
and I was really, Courtney, when we last spoke, I remember taking away from our conversation sort of one of your big objectives, which you said to me, was we really want to have as close to a one-to-one conversation as we can with our consumers, with our audience. And we want to insert ourselves in the conversation, but do it in a way that feels natural, that represents us as our fandom as well, that we're a fan alongside our consumers. And of course, with the support of the NBA and with the activity on the social channels that we've talked about, I think that that presents a lot of cool opportunity for the true moment-to-moment conversation with your consumers. So how have you been able to effectively harness that to better build your brand, or have you? Do you feel like there's more you could be doing on that side?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always more that we could be doing. It really comes down to the social listening that we talked about earlier, and getting those insights. And then if it's not real time in those communications, figuring out, what are those insights that we can use to have a targeted, tailored, and personalized message to the fans. So it's anything from, listening to consumers talk about flavors that they really like. So we actually just picked our summer flavor for a limited time offering next year for Ruffles. I can't reveal what it is, but it directly came from social listening from some of our NBA fans, while they were engaging in watching a game and talking about eating Ruffles. And so, that's an example of us, picking an innovation based on those conversations. But then also just hearing, what fans are excited about. Whether it is, gosh, we really like to see, this partnership from an apparel standpoint, or we would like to see this from, the next armored ridge top or the next ridge top design. And so just in our brand plans, we use the social listening to impact that. But then also as we think about, the right message to the right person at the right time, and wherever they are in their consumer journey, figuring out, hey, is that an equity message? Is that a purchase message? Like, what do we actually want to serve up this audience? Those insights are just so rich and robust.
Erica, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head on that one, Courtney. I think that one other thing that I wanted to mention was just that we're not only leveraging like the league channels on social, we're also really interested in making sure that we're leveraging our due partners in terms of athletes and their social following to the largest extent as possible, right? They have their own unique personalities and profiles. And so we're always looking for ways to make sure that, we're obviously being great partners to them and being almost like a sounding board for their interests and another additional platform to make sure that their passions are getting out to our consumers, but also making sure that we are creating tailored content that would be interesting to their individual audiences as well and fan bases.
It's cool. It's so cool because it's this beautiful reciprocity that you're building where, the athletes in the league are helping you build your brand, of course, but at the same time, you're getting great exposure for these athletes, helping maybe them show a different side of them that doesn't necessarily make its way out to the masses. So it's just really interesting to hear how you guys approach it. And I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's a great strategy, really great strategy. Let's zoom out, and we've talked a lot about PepsiCo, and as well we should, but there's other brands that have been, very active in the sports marketing world for a long time. And I'm sure the folks on the phone or on the Zoom would be interested to hear a little bit more about who else you see, other brands that you see that are in the space that are leveraging sports marketing in a cool and interesting way. Is there anyone that stands out? Is there a brand that stands out? Are there any specific campaigns that in recent memory that particularly jump out at you as like, that was just a really job well done?
Yes, I'm excited about this. So definitely a few campaigns stick out to me. Let's start with CarMax and State Farm. So they are also NBA sponsors. I think they've done an incredible job of showcasing their partnership with the NBA and WNBA in the same advertising spots. So you probably saw, for example, the CarMax commercial with Steph Curry and Sue Bird. So to be able to make sure that they are featured on that equitable platform, that's not common, right? And we are very interested at PepsiCo in making sure that we are promoting our sponsorship of both leagues and making sure that the WNBA doesn't feel like a second priority in terms of our basketball priorities and strategy. So I think that both State Farm and CarMax have done a great job. And so those are some campaigns that stick out to me. Obviously, Chris Paul on State Farm and Sabrina Ionescu, they also had an ad. So those are a couple of campaigns I've seen this season that have been really well done. Great crossover ads.
Couldn't agree more. Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, I would just say we actually just finished doing some consumer research and talking with consumers just about, various advertising and marketing initiatives we have. And what really always sticks out at me is the fans see so much of the athletes on court, in the game and in jersey. And they just really want to see who they are off the court. And I think you look at the Mountain Dew Rise spot that came out with LeBron, him doing the tango, and you saw him with his family. And you look at the Michelob Ultra, Super Bowl happy commercial. I mean, it's celebrating, the joy of winning celebration. And that's I think what we kind of look at as best practices when we're getting a pulse on what other brands are doing is how are brands really showing a different side of the athlete. Because at the end of the day, they're human, they're people just like us, and I think there is, this real desire to see the other sides of athletes, which is the conversations that are happening right now.
Michelob, CarMax, State Farm, a couple of other ones to go and check out as from the best, recognizing best, real recognize real, as they say. All right, let's look ahead. Let's look to next year. Hopefully, we're going to have fans back again. Fingers crossed. It looks that way. What's in your plans for next year? Is there anything that you're particularly excited about in the year ahead? Anything, obviously, don't share anything sensitive here. I think this is being recorded. But anything that you could share that you're excited about and that you've got planned for the upcoming season would be great to hear about.
Yeah, I think we're, crossing our fingers and toes and everything that we can engage back in person with fans. And so one of the things I am most excited about is that, Eric and I, as well as Mountain Dew and Ruffles, will be partnering, more moving forward. And I think that's something, as PepsiCo, we have a big house of brands, and there's so many opportunities. So you're going to see more from Ruffles and Dew together, which I think is going to be really, really exciting. And just again, we put the consumer first in everything we do, and there's a lot of pent up energy and excitement. I just can't wait to get back into the arenas in person, and that's what we really want to harness, like that energy and that consumer sentiment. And we're extremely excited that it's going to be the NBA's 75th season. I mean, just remarkable. And they have so many great plans. And we've been spending a lot of time talking about just doing more from a purpose standpoint. Erica talked about how we want to give equal kind of weight and credence to the WNBA and the NBA, but also use our brands to impact change for our audiences and our targets, and also the NBA fan base. There's a lot going on and a lot of causes, whether it's racial equality journey, gender equality, so many causes that we're really keeping a pulse on and having conversations amongst ourselves, the league, and with our athlete partners to figure out what the best role is we can play. So I would say we're really excited to make an impact and celebrate being back together as we look towards tip off in October.
Yes, I'm so excited to partner with Courtney and Ruffles even more next season. Can't wait. This is our first hurrah right here on this panel together, and it's just going to continue that Power One relationship. Many consumers may not even know that Ruffles and Mountain Dew are both owned by PepsiCo, so we definitely want to make that connection clear. Also, given that fans have been at home for the past year, I know that a big priority on my side is to invite more fans out to events, right? So as we prepare for All-Star Weekend, giving fans the opportunity to come. So sweepstakes to be able to give away tickets, because it's definitely an event that not a lot of people have had access to in the past. Even giving out tickets to games across both leagues. So that's definitely a priority for me, because I know that it can be very expensive to attend these types of events, and want to make it a little bit more democratic and universal to be able to go. Also, we're excited for new content coming out with our athletes. So I won't give away the big surprises, but you should definitely see across, TVCs and then also digital platforms, more athlete-centric communications coming out from us next season, and much more to come. So looking forward to next season and being back.
I love it. It's such an interesting insight, Courtney, what you said about harnessing that energy, that pent-up energy of this fandom that's like ready to come out at any moment, and they're just itching to get back inside the arena, in the stadium. How are you thinking of harnessing that? Is there anything you could share? Is there anything that you're thinking about, like this is a really cool way for us to take on that energy and sort of reward it with some of what we're doing. And maybe it's in some of your live eventing setup activations or anything you could expand on there.
Yeah, a couple things. At Pepsi, we have a lot of relationships, like Erica mentioned earlier, with teams and stadiums and arenas. And so, just looking at where our Ruffles athletes, our chip deal athletes, Anthony Davis, Jason Tatum with the Lakers and the Celtics, looking at those stadiums, looking at those cities, doing some like localized fun things when our athletes get back on the court. And so I think you're going to see us do really, really fun things, surprise and delight, and have fun, right? I think the second thing, like Erica said as well, is, it's a small percentage of the NBA fan base and our consumers of Ruffles do that actually get to go see the events live. And we want to continue just to elevate the at-home experience as well. And nothing goes better than watching a game than doing Ruffles. So we spend a lot of time just thinking about, how can we make sure that we're getting snack and beverages in the hands of those fans at home while they're watching the game, while they're watching the highlights afterwards, while they're tweeting and following their favorite athletes. So a lot of really fun things to come as well.
And one other sort of anecdote I picked up on that both of you mentioned actually is just, and it stuck with me, is just the desire and ambition to stay aligned with. You mentioned, Courtney, the causes. Erica, you'd mentioned wanting to give equal penance to WNBA and NBA. And I'm thinking, practically speaking, of course, there's partnerships that you can strike. But when it comes to activation, like media activation, for example, does that play a role in sort of how you approach media activation as well? Are you trying to look for diversity-owned publishers, for example? Has it made its way downstream that far, or is that something that you might be thinking of? Maybe Eric, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I will definitely say that we're looking at diversity in terms of the agencies that we work with, especially when it comes to Mountain Dew and some of the content that we have coming out in a couple of months. And so definitely leaning in there. I also just wanted to mention, just in terms of media, and Courtney touched on this as well, even though we will be shifting back to an in-person focus, like we don't want to abandon what we've learned in the past year and a half in terms of keeping that digital first focus, right? So you will continue to see Enter the Dew Zone. We're already talking about potentially bringing back the podcast, right? We still want to have that presence leading up to all the tentpole events, all the way through the end of these different events throughout the season. So we definitely want to keep a digital media focus and that diversity, as you mentioned, across the different partners that we work with, so that we can be a reflection of the leagues that we are actually partnered with as well.
That's great. That's great. I don't know how we're doing on time, Jesse. I'm either 4 minutes over or we've got till 2:45, but just cut me off, play the music when we start going over too far. I had one last question I wanted to throw out there, and I have till 2:45. All right, great. And then we'll flip it over to questions. I'm going off script, guys. So this wasn't an agreed to question ahead of time. I hope it's okay. But we've got, I'm sure, folks on the line looking up to everything that PepsiCo does. You guys are the gold standard. What advice would you give if I'm a brand looking to get in to, start to explore the sports marketing space and I'm just starting out? Is there anything that you could share, any advice that you would give to a brand that's looking at this medium and potentially getting involved in it? Courtney, I'll start with you.
Yeah. Great question. First, I would say start with the consumer. Most brands have rich, robust consumer insights, but even if you don't, just who is your consumer? What are their passions, values? Unpack that to figure out what might be the right place to play. Because, like we started off, there are so many different avenues. There's leagues, there's athletes, there's technology. But I would start, keep it simple. Start with the sport. Which sport resonates the most with your consumer and with your audience? And then leverage partners. That's the second tip I would have is, like we've been talking about, the NBA is such a great partner, as well as all of our athlete teams, as well as just, our external agencies and partners. Leverage partners for the expertise. Have those brainstorming sessions. Talk about your shared objectives. and just really start small would be the third thing that I would say is, you're not going to probably have a full 360 comprehensive program or plan or activation out the door. Find one thing and just laser focused on it, and keep the goal of this is a pilot, this is an experiment, and then grow from there.
Great points.
Yeah, I think those were great points, Courtney. I would just add, start locally, start at the local level. So when you look at a league sponsorship, obviously it involves multi-million-dollar investment. So starting small at the local level with potentially a team partnership. When I go down and look at the sponsors of various teams across the nation, you won't see those at a league level, but they're relevant in the communities that they serve. So maybe starting small with the team, but just keeping the consumer first. And then even if you aren't going to go with a professional team sponsorship, there are obviously a lot of community basketball associations, youth organizations, high school. And so we oftentimes hear from those types of organizations as well. So maybe starting locally, either with a high school or a collegiate team, or potentially a professional NBA team. I would start there to make sure that that's resonating with your audience before going to the league level at a national level.
Great. Okay. And now I'm gonna switch it up. And so we asked, I assume folks on the line are looking to learn from you and are looking to build out some type of sports marketing strategy of their own. There's also, I'm sure, a lot of potential partners on the line, and you're probably going to be getting a lot of emails after we hang up here. So what advice would you give to partners that want to speak to PepsiCo and the values that we've discussed today? There might be some differences, whether we're talking Ruffles or Do, but if I'm a partner looking to potentially approach PepsiCo about working together in some capacity, is there anything that I should keep in mind? Is there anything that's super important to you that I should make sure that I'm leading with? And Erica, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, definitely take a look at our brand's values and the company's values and just making sure that there are synergies there, as Courtney talked about. All partnerships don't necessarily make sense for the consumers that certain leagues or partners might be serving. So just making sure that there are synergies there before you have that conversation so that it can be an authentic relationship and have that reciprocal effect. That was where I would begin.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Erica. I think the other thing that I would say is come to us with big, bold, breakthrough, creative thinking to partner. We're built on disruption at PepsiCo. We like to be the first to do things. We like to push the envelope. We like to pride ourselves on being on the pulse of the consumer and technology and trends. So I would say, if you're looking to partner, bring us those ideas that you're like, nobody will be into this, or this can't be done. Because that's really what gets us extremely excited. And one of the many great things about the role that Erica and I have.
I love it. Big ideas welcome. You heard it here. All right, we've got 5 minutes left. Let's flip it to questions. And I have one that I'm going to read out to both of you. And hopefully you can both sound off on this. It's a great question. What can heritage brands learn from newer digital first brands when it comes to authentically marketing to Gen Z? I think that's a great, great question. So what can heritage brands learn from digital first brands when it comes to authentically marketing to Gen Z? I'll let either chime in.
Yeah, I can start with that one. I think one of the things that we constantly talk about is, the billions of impressions we get every day with our packaging in store, and just not being over reliant on that. And as we talked about, like looking at e-commerce, looking at the innovative things that are being done with social media, being able to buy through Instagram and things like that. And digital first and smaller startup brands, they are scrappier. And you guys are a lot of times more on the pulse of doing things for the first time and pushing the envelope and everything I just talked about with the ideas that we see at Pepsi. And so personally, I just spend a lot of time, looking at those smaller brands in our categories and in other categories and what they're doing to reach consumers. Because, I have this bias that, you actually sometimes do the best marketing when you have the smallest budget because you have to make every dollar work extremely hard.
Sure.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely think in order to appeal to Gen Z, you have to be social focused, right? In terms of your social media strategy. And obviously that's a lot more efficient than a lot of other platforms. And so making sure that you're incentivizing Gen Z according to their passion points. So if we're talking about sports, tickets, merchandise featuring their favorite player or their favorite team. And so those are just some very low-hanging fruit tactics that they can explore just to start off. But definitely making sure they have a presence on Twitter and Instagram and the different channels that Gen Z definitely frequents.
And Erica, I actually have a follow-up question to that because I think that that's a really interesting insight. And, obviously most brands, if not all brands, have at least a toe in the water as it relates to social and are doing something there. But I think also most brands recognize that's not where they can't put all their budget there, right? And there's likely incremental eyeballs, people that they're missing if they're taking a look at social and social only. So is there anything that you've done to kind of complement your social strategy from a media activation perspective? And have you seen success with that?
Yeah, actually, the Do Zone with Drewski is a great example here because we actually had a flight on Spotify in terms of having ads on Spotify to promote that, especially since it's on an audio platform. But we've actually seen across other brands that audio ads on Spotify or Pandora can be very effective. And so that, audio media plans are a great complement to social media plans as well.
Great. Another question here is, as leaders, you are always developing your abilities. What skills would you like your marketing team to develop this year? I'm interested to hear the answer on this one.
That's a great one. A few things we talk about on my team. I think first, consumer empathy, like we've talked about a lot, is the world's heavy right now for a lot of different reasons, and just making sure that we continue to understand our consumer, understand our audiences, have a pulse on their shopping behavior, but also their social media consumption. How are those trends from a social listening and those conversations changing? Second, the media landscape. I talked about this before, but ever evolving, across various spectrums. Erica just talked about audio, AI, and so many other things trying to do. What's the right media mix? How do we make sure that we're putting everything together in a really bright way? And then I would say, the third thing from a perspective, empathy, media, just leadership. Like we talked about before, great brands are built by great teams. It truly, business results and brand results don't happen if you don't have the right team. And so I think just a really robust focus on people and making sure that we're developing people, we're developing our partnerships, we're really listening to each other, and again, just continuing to push the envelope.
Those are great, Courtney. I definitely think that I want the marketing team that I work with to continue to demonstrate agility, right? A lot of our plans were created in a month or less. WNBA All-Star activation, for example, All-Star for NBA was very uncertain given the pandemic this year. So to continue to be able to be flexible, right, while leveraging all of our resources to pull together great plans in a limited period of time. And then also just continuing to show that empathy that Courtney talked about. And then I think most importantly, to be able to show that digital analytics and analysis experience, because again, right now we bring a lot of creative people into PepsiCo, and obviously a lot of people with strong data analytics skills as well. But the onus is on us to be able to show the return on these different league investments. So to be able to analyze all these different programs that we're putting out for NBA and WNBA is going to be super critical to continue.
100%. Amen to that. Well, I think that brings us right to time. I see Jesse is back in the picture here. So that's the equivalent of the music playing. This was so much fun. It was so lovely, Erica and Courtney. Thanks so much for the time. And I hope everyone on the line enjoyed the conversation.